In this video, I want to talk about the process that's involved at NinjaVA when it comes to conducting the group interviews. So at this point, you've analyzed a number of different candidates and you've selected ideally 2 different candidates in order to be interviewed. And I do recommend that we interview at least 2 candidates. Sometimes it's the case where you're going through the spotlight of one specific candidate and your mind is almost made up. They look amazing, they're well spoken, they have great caliber, and you kind of get to that point of like, I just want this person, right? With that said, in my experience, I think the best policy is, even if you're feeling that way with one specific individual, let's always match them up with a second candidate to also be interviewed. I think there's a lot to be said for kind of comparing and contrasting in the moment after the second interview has been concluded, because it's nice and fresh. And sometimes you'd be amazed at how well, or maybe on the opposite side, how poorly one of the candidates performed. Or maybe, one of the very important questions that were asked was something that didn't bring a lot of confidence. And you could find yourself doing a little bit of a pivot in the last moment. So I always recommend, let's do at least 2 interviews. Now, the way it works out in terms of structure is we're first going to clarify a time and a date with you to ensure that you're available. After we set that time in our schedule, we're going to reach out to either of those 2 candidates and basically try and reserve them for a 30-minute interval inside of that 1-hour block that we've confirmed with you. Now, we want you to keep that time available, but ultimately it's not set in stone until we hear back from the 2 VAs. Once we get final confirmation from them, we'll reach out to you. We're going to send you an email that likely has a link to this video, as well as a calendar invite. In that calendar invite, you're also going to see our Zoom link in order to get into the interview itself. Now, we always make the offer, either it'll be myself conducting the group interviews or potentially one of my hiring managers at NinjaVA. We always make the offer, though, that you could show up a few minutes early, and likely, unless we have another event or another call taking place directly before yours, we'll probably be online earlier. And if we need to rehearse anything, or if you have any last minute questions, you showing up just a little bit early is just never a bad thing. One thing we want to ensure, of course, it goes without saying, we want to make sure that you as the client or the employer in this situation is never late. So try and time block, set a reminder. You'll have the calendar invite, and just being on time or slightly early is always the best practice in this situation. From there, how it's going to go is there's going to be 2 30-minute interval interviews allocated, 1 to each of the candidates that you selected. Okay? Now, to start out each of those calls, myself or whoever's conducting the interview will just kind of reiterate what the guidelines are for the call. And really what that sounds like is we want to neutralize any sort of stress or anxiety that anyone's experiencing on the call, including yourself. You got to remember too, the VA is signing in probably in the middle of the night. They're coming into the Zoom call, and there's a number of other people that are already there. So we want to make sure that they're feeling welcomed and comfortable, because that can be a very challenging environment to navigate through. At that point, we're also going to kind of finish off the guidelines, reiterating the expectation that we're not making any sort of final decisions on the call, and we're going to basically rehash and reflect after the fact, and we're going to come up with what the next best steps are going forward out of the call. One thing that I like to bring up at this point here is you as a business owner are probably very proficient and confident when it comes to hiring for the positions inside of your own company, mainly the technicians, the direct labor, whatever it is you do for a company, you're probably good at hiring those people, right? However, when it comes to hiring admin, that might be something that you don't have a lot of repetition and a lot of experience with. And when it comes to hiring virtual admin, that could be something that's completely outside of your wheelhouse. So if you're feeling a lack of confidence at this point, I just want to reassure you that this is literally what we've done hundreds and hundreds of times. Not only have I hired and onboarded a number of virtual assistants inside of my own home service business, but we have done this very, very frequently for other people. So I always make the offer too that you don't have to feel like you're coming to this interview having to take the reins and conduct the entire thing. In fact, our offer to you always is that we'll officiate the call for you. We still need you to be on the call, and we need you to be engaged and obviously asking questions that are meaningful and important to you. But at the end of the day, we'll make sure that, the conversation flows nicely, and that if there are any questions on either side, be it the VA or yourself, that we adequately kind of check all the criteria that is required of this call in order to call it effective and ultimately be in a position where we can make a decision in terms of where we're going next. In terms of content for the specific subject matter of the call, what I always recommend is at some point throughout this interview, we should talk about core values. At the end of the day, core values are what you hire, fire, reward, and reprimand on. It's what's important to you as the entrepreneur and what's important to your company, right? And I've always found if we don't have a good core value match in that we care about the same stuff, at the end of the day, we can train the skill and we can train the task, but it's really hard if we have a fundamental misalignment when it comes to core values. So at some point in the interview, it's good to go over the core values. In addition to that, it's always good as well if you can have some sort of an idea as to what the skills, abilities, tasks, or responsibilities are that you're looking for in terms of fulfilling in this role, right? So if you're looking for somebody to be on the phones, answering emails, and posting on social media, that is even in itself a good overview. And I think these sorts of interviews are a good opportunity to see if this is a good fit. And that's really what we're trying to establish. And you having a good idea of kind of what does fulfillment of this role look like, and what does the day look like that this person could potentially be fulfilling goes a long ways. So at this point, we've conducted the first group call. It'll be you, myself, or someone from the NinjaVA team, as well as candidate A. And then we'll conduct the second interview call, and that'll be obviously you and I, as well as candidate B at that time. After that, it's always good to just use the opportunity, having just conducted the interviews, as an opportunity to just kind of reflect a little bit and see what we're thinking, and maybe your thoughts and our thoughts. Maybe there's some congruency there. Maybe one of us has noticed something that the other hasn't. So I always find a good debrief at the end of the calls will basically get us to a position where we feel good going forward from there. And what going forward from there looks like is we're going to make usually one of three decisions at this point. We're going to decide to either hire person or interviewee number 1, hire number 2, or go back and look at a fresh set of candidates. Ordinarily, it's usually we're going to select one of the 2 candidates. However, the option and the priority is always there that we want to find you the best candidate possible. And if that means going back to the drawing board and essentially going back to the last step and then coming back to a new interview in the future, then so be it. At the end of the day, that's our priority. We want to find you somebody who's awesome and that you're excited by in terms of bringing them on into your team to fulfill in a very meaningful way. Now, coming out of this call, it's totally reasonable to feel like I have a good idea, but I'm not really ready to make the final decision and I want to kind of sleep on it. I'd say that's super fair. I do also think it's worth mentioning, though, that there's that concept that time kills deals. And that's something that I actually live by in my own business and how I conduct things. So what we want to consider here is the same way you were shown a multiple of different candidates. There were probably 3 or 4 candidates in your account. Each one of those candidates are also shared out with potentially up to 2 or even 3 different prospective employers. So it's one of those things, if you feel really good about somebody, it's always good to make a decision and move forward as soon as you're feeling comfortable. The same concept would hold true in that they might have also already applied for a position outside of NinjaVA. And again, if we let 2, 3, 4, 5 days go by without making a decision, then there is the potential that you won't get the person that you ultimately selected. And that would be very unfortunate, of course. Once you've selected a candidate, we're going to make an offer. They're going to fill out a contract with NinjaVA. And once we receive that back from them, basically we're going to bridge you guys together. We're going to basically bring you together in the form of a group email. And at that point, you're free to start to communicate with them. If you have a Slack channel or a WhatsApp channel or whatever that looks like in terms of group messaging, essentially at that point, they're allocated to your team. And at that time, it's always a good idea to come up with a prospective plan in terms of when onboarding will take place, what the date and time will be, and to start to make those arrangements in order to bring this person on your team and get them trained up and ready to go. So in the coming videos, we're going to talk about what the best practices are in terms of onboarding and training a new virtual assistant. Hopefully this gives you a good overview as to what the group interviews look like and will feel like. But by all means, if you have any questions in the meantime, feel free to send us a text message or you can reach out by email. Thanks so much, and we'll see you in the group interview.